The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Lake Willow Estates, painting the water with streaks of amber and gold. Mark Thompson stood on his meticulously maintained dock, his fingers drumming an irritated rhythm against the weathered wooden railing. Directly in front of him sat an abomination, a massive, gleaming hot tub that most definitely did not belong to him. He bought his lakefront property 3 years ago with a specific vision, a peaceful retreat where he could escape the chaos of his high-stress job as a corporate litigation attorney. The dock was his sanctuary, a carefully curated space that reflected his precise and methodical nature. Every plank was sealed, every piece of decking positioned with mathematical accuracy. And now, without warning or consent, someone had violated that sanctuary. The hot tub wasn't just any ordinary spa. It was a monstrosity, a behemoth of stainless steel and acrylic, complete with LED mood lighting and what appeared to be built-in speakers. Its garish presence stood in stark contrast to the natural beauty of the lake, like a disco ball in a Zen garden. But what infuriated Mark even more was who had placed it there. Margaret Hoffman, the most notorious member of the Lake Willow Estates Homeowners Association, a woman Mark and the other residents not so affectionately referred to as HOA Karen. Margaret had a reputation. A retired high school principal with nothing better to do than enforce every microscopic rule in the HOA bylaws. She was the kind of person who would measure grass height with a ruler and issue violation notices if a lawn ornament was 2 inches out of alignment. Her silver bob and perpetually pursed lips were legendary throughout the community. Mark remembered the heated community meeting just 2 weeks prior. Margaret had railed against his non-regulation dock stain and the unauthorized maritime storage container he kept at the end of his dock. The irony was not lost on him that she was now the one flagrantly violating every conceivable community standard. The hot tub didn't just appear by accident. Mark knew exactly what happened. The HOA had recently approved a community wellness initiative, which Margaret had championed. Supposedly, this meant shared recreational equipment that could be used by all residents. But Mark knew better. This was personal. This was about control. He pulled out his phone and snapped several photographs documenting every angle of the unauthorized installation. The dock's weight distribution was clearly compromised, and he was certain the placement violated at least 6 different HOA regulations. His legal mind was already crafting a meticulous complaint, each point supported by photographic evidence and precise measurements. But something told Mark that a formal complaint wouldn't be enough. Not this time. Margaret had crossed the line, and she was about to learn that you don't mess with a lawyer who knows how to read the fine print and how to execute a perfectly calculated revenge. As the sun began to set, casting an orange glow across the lake, Mark allowed himself a small, calculating smile. This was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The next morning, Mark arrived at the Lake Willow Estates community office precisely at 8:00 a.m., a meticulously prepared folder tucked under his arm. Linda Rodriguez, the part-time community manager, looked up with a mixture of dread and resignation. She knew Mark Thompson by reputation, a man who could turn a simple HOA dispute into a legal labyrinth that would make most board members want to resign. "I'd like to formally document the unauthorized installation of recreational equipment on my private dock," Mark began, his voice calm and measured. He spread out a series of photographs, each annotated with precise measurements and references to specific HOA bylaws. "This hot tub was placed without proper approval, violates multiple community guidelines, and poses a significant structural risk to the dock's integrity." Linda shifted uncomfortably. She dealt with Margaret Hoffman's shenanigans for years, and Mark's complaint was going to cause a nuclear-level confrontation. "Mr. Thompson," she said carefully, "the board will review your complaint at the next meeting." "I expect nothing less," Mark replied, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. What Linda didn't know was that Mark had already set several plans in motion. His first call that morning had been to a marine surveyor and a structural engineer, professionals who would provide independent documentation of the hot tub's potential damage to his private property. By noon, Margaret Hoffman was aware of the complaint. She stormed into the community office, her silver bob perfectly coiffed, her designer pantsuit a uniform of suburban aggression. "This is ridiculous," she declared, brandishing a copy of Mark's complaint like a weapon. "I'm improving the community's recreational opportunities." The truth was far more personal. Margaret had a long-standing vendetta against Mark. When he first moved into the community 3 years ago, he challenged a series of outdated HOA regulations, successfully forcing the board to modernize several archaic rules. It was a humiliation Margaret had never forgiven. That evening, Mark sat on his back deck overlooking the lake. His laptop was open, multiple tabs showing maritime law, HOA regulations, and detailed satellite images of Lake Willow Estates. He wasn't just preparing a complaint, he was planning a response that would make Margaret regret the day she ever decided to challenge him. The hot tub was more than just an object. It was a declaration of war. As darkness fell, Mark made a series of careful preparations. The weather report predicted strong winds from the northwest, winds that would push anything not securely anchored directly away from his property and into the broader expanses of Lake Willow. His fingers traced the edge of an old nautical chart, a gleam of determination in his eyes. Margaret thought she was playing chess, but Mark was about to show her he knew how to play a much more complex game. At 2:17 a.m., with most of Lake Willow Estates sound asleep, Mark moved with surgical precision. He'd spent weeks studying tide charts, wind patterns, and the specific weight distribution of the hot tub. His years of competitive sailing during law school hadn't been wasted. They prepared him for moments exactly like this. The dock security lights cast a soft glow as he worked, wearing dark clothing and latex gloves. Each movement was calculated, silent, deliberate. He'd already disabled the hot tub's electrical connection days earlier, ensuring no risk of electrical damage. Now he carefully loosened the mounting brackets that Margaret had so hastily installed, checking and double-checking his work. The hot tub was heavy, nearly 800 pounds when empty, closer to 1,200 pounds when filled with water. But Mark had done his homework. The northwest wind would provide just enough force, the lake's gentle current would do the rest. By morning, the spa would be someone else's problem. He worked methodically, removing a critical support bracket here, loosening a critical connection there. To the untrained eye, it would look like nothing more than a poorly secure installation that had simply succumbed to natural forces. No direct evidence of intentional removal, just a spectacular failure of basic engineering. As he worked, Mark's mind drifted to the HOA meeting where Margaret had first proposed the Community Wellness Initiative. She'd stood there, radiating self-importance, talking about shared resources and community spirit. But Mark knew the truth. This was about power, about control, about proving she could do whatever she wanted, whenever she wanted. The northwest wind picked up, creating small white caps on the lake's surface. Perfect. By 3:45 a.m., Mark was back in his bedroom, scrolling through his carefully prepared documentation. Emails detailing his previous complaints about dock modifications, photographic evidence of the improper installation, expert assessments from the marine surveyor about the potential structural risks. If anyone came asking, he had a perfect, legally bulletproof defense. At precisely 6:17 a.m., the first phone call came in. Margaret's shrill voice echoed through the community's emergency contact system. "My hot tub, it's going." Mark allowed himself the smallest of smiles. Not gone, he thought, just relocated. The hot tub was drifting peacefully across Lake Willow, slowly making its way toward the public boat launch nearly 2 miles away. By the time anyone could organize a recovery effort, it would be long gone, or so damaged by its journey that it would be entirely unsalvageable. Revenge, Mark had always believed, was a dish best served cold, or in this case, slowly drifting across a misty lake at dawn. The fallout was everything Mark had anticipated and more. By mid-morning, Lake Willow Estates was in complete chaos. Emergency services, local news vans, and a flotilla of concerned residents gathered at the public boat launch, where the massive hot tub sat half-submerged, looking like a beach whale of suburban excess. Margaret Hoffman was at the center of the commotion, her carefully maintained composure completely shattered. It was perfectly secured, she shrieked to anyone who would listen. "This is impossible. Someone must have tampered with it." Mark watched the scene unfold from his deck, binoculars in hand, looking for all the world like a calm bird watcher. His neighbor, Jack Pearson, wandered over, a cup of coffee in his hand and a knowing smirk on his face. "Quite a show," Jack commented, leaning against the deck railing. Mark raised an eyebrow. "I have no idea what you're talking about." The marine surveyor Mark had previously contacted was now on site, clipboard in hand, carefully examining the hot tub. His report would be devastating. The damage from its lake journey was extensive. Salt water exposure, structural stress, electrical system compromise. The spa was a total loss. What made the situation even more delicious was the insurance angle. The hot tub had been installed without proper permits, without the HOA board's full approval, and without any documentation of its installation. Margaret's insurance claim would be, at best, complicated. At worst, entirely denied. By noon, the local news had arrived. WLR News was broadcasting live from the boat launch with a perky reporter detailing the mysterious disappearance and discovery of the hot tub. Mark watched with clinical detachment as Margaret was interviewed, her usual composure completely unraveled. "This is sabotage," she declared, her face red with anger. Someone deliberately removed this community resource. The irony was not lost on Mark. Margaret, who had built her reputation on enforcing every microscopic HOA regulation, had now become a victim of her own bureaucratic overreach. Inside his home, Mark's phone began to buzz. Text messages from other HOA members, some sympathetic, some amused, all curious about what happened. He became something of a folk hero among the residents who had long suffered under Margaret's tyrannical rule. A formal HOA investigation was inevitable. Mark had already prepared for that with a meticulously documented paper trail showing his repeated concerns about the dock's structural integrity, the improper installation, and the potential safety risks. As the afternoon wore on, Margaret's accusations grew more desperate. She began suggesting conspiracy theories, pointing fingers at anyone and everyone. But Mark knew the truth. Sometimes the universe has a way of delivering justice, one carefully planned step at a time. The hot tub's journey was far from over, and Mark was just getting started. The HOA hearing was scheduled for the following month, and Mark knew it would be the performance of a lifetime. He arrived at the community center dressed impeccably in a tailored navy suit, a leather portfolio containing meticulously organized documentation. The room was packed. Every resident of Lake Willow Estates seemed to have shown up, creating a charged atmosphere of anticipation. Margaret sat across the room, her usual silver bob now streaked with stress-induced gray. She had filed a formal complaint against Mark, alleging deliberate property damage and violation of community guidelines. What she didn't know was that Mark had been 3 steps ahead from the beginning. The hearing began with Margaret's dramatic testimony. She wove a complex narrative of conspiracy, painting herself as the victim of a targeted attack. Mr. Thompson has consistently demonstrated a disregard for community standards, she declared, her voice trembling with manufactured indignation. When it was Mark's turn to speak, he was calm personification. He walked the board through a comprehensive presentation that would have impressed even his most demanding corporate law colleagues. The hot tub in question, Mark began, was installed without proper permits, violated multiple HOA guidelines, and posed significant structural risks to my private property. He projected photographs showing the improper installation, expert testimony from the marine surveyor, and a detailed analysis of the dock's load-bearing capabilities. Each slide was a surgical strike, dismantling Margaret's credibility piece by piece. He revealed emails where Margaret had ignored previous complaints about dock modifications. He presented structural engineering reports highlighting the potential damage the hot tub could have caused. Most damning of all, he demonstrated that the hot tub's installation directly violated 7 separate HOA bylaws that Margaret herself had championed over the years. The room was silent, save for the occasional gasp or murmur. Jack Peterson, Mark's neighbor, leaned over and whispered, "Man, he's not just defending himself. He's putting her on trial." The HOA board's deliberation was brief. Not only did they dismiss Margaret's complaint, but they also issued her a formal warning about unauthorized installations and potential bylaw violations. The final blow came when they recommended a comprehensive review of all recent community improvements initiated by Margaret. In the weeks that followed, Mark became something of a local legend. Residents who had long suffered under Margaret's tyrannical HOA management quietly thanked him. The community dynamic shifted. No longer would one person hold unchecked power. As for the hot tub, it became a running joke. Insurance refused to fully cover it due to improper installation. The marine salvage company charged an exorbitant fee for its recovery. Margaret was left with both a financial and reputational loss. Mark returned to his peaceful lakefront property, the dock restored to its original pristine condition. Justice, he reflected, was not about revenge. It was about accountability. And sometimes accountability arrived on the gentle waves of a perfectly timed lake current.